Danny Thornton and Joe Tumberland had just finished their shift and were heading back to Central when the radio suddenly squawked to life. Danny, who had been dozing in the cab while Joe drove through the night, yawned and rubbed the sleep from his eyes before responding to the radio's shrill beeping. Meat Wagon 2 to Central. What can we do for you, Central?
Danny, is that you?
Sure, Shirley, Danny said, wiggling his eyebrows suggestively at a grinning Joe. What can I do for you, baby?
You can cut the crap for a start,
she responded. Danny, who had been stepping out with Shirley for the last couple of months, suddenly sat up straighter, frowning at the mic. Shirley was a fun-loving girl. Hell, he had to have a sense of humor to be in this godforsaken job. But now she was all business. In fact, if Danny wasn't mistaken, there seemed to be a slight tremor in her voice. Go ahead, Shirley, he said, now frowning at Joe, who shrugged in return before turning his attention back to the road. How can we help you?
I need you to head to this address,
she said, rifling up the address from a nearby farm. Oh, come on, Shirley. Our shift ended 10 minutes ago. Send the new crew out.
You don't understand, Danny,
she shot back.
I think we have a code 623. Crew members in distress.
You're shitting me, he said, gripping the mic tighter. What the hell's going on?
I sent out John Wills and Andrew Davis, she replied, after receiving a call from the Cloak Farm, code 121, reanimation in progress. Apparently, the family's grandfather reanimated overnight after passing in his sleep.
Was he locked down? Danny interrupted.
Yes, all standard lockdown procedures were in place. All family members went to bed in their own separate rooms, doors locked in case of accidental death and reanimation. I received the call at 1 a.m. after the family awoke to the reanimated body pounding on the door. They called it in and I sent out Meat Wagon 3. Simple bag and tag for incineration, but it's been over an hour now and they haven't returned to Central. I tried their radio, their cells, even rang the home address for the caller. Nothing, Danny, not a goddamn thing. I think they could be in trouble. I really do, and you guys are only a few miles out. Can you check it out for me? Please.
Sure, Danny said, without hesitation. We're on our way. What was the address again? She told them while Joe typed into the computer. He gave Danny the nod. Okay, Central, we have it. On our way.
Thank you,
she responded.
And Danny, be careful, okay?
You know me, babe. Careful's my middle name. Less than 10 minutes later, they were pulled up beside Meat Wagon 3, which sat like some kind of hunched animal in the darkened farmyard. Lights burned in the two-story farmhouse, but there was a certain stillness that both men noticed as they exited their vehicle and loosened their sidearms before approaching the front of the house. They came together at the front porch, weapons raised. Danny gave Joe the nod before slowly reaching out and trying the handle. Finding it locked, he raised one large fist and rapped on the door, wincing as he defiled the silence. For a moment, there was nothing. Then came the sound of rummaging from the other side. Then the snap of a drawn lock. As the door was thrown open, both men let out a cry and jumped back, weapons raised, as a man splattered in blood staggered towards them, a broken chair leg draped on the floor behind him. For a moment he stood there, wavering, before sinking to his knees, falling heavily against the floor jamb, revealing the old man who stood directly behind him. The old party's eyes widened as he saw the two guns pointed at him. Don't shoot! He exclaimed, throwing his hands up in the air. My name's Dr. Robert Shaw, and this, he said, placing his hand on the other man's blood-soaked shoulder, is my son-in-law, Mr. David Tomlinson. Come towards me, Danny said, motioning with his gun to the old party. The other man also started to rise. Not you. You stay right there. Joe, you keep him covered, he said, pushing the old man up against the van and checking him for weapons. If he so much as blinks, you put a bullet through his face. You got it, Joe said, drawing a bead on the blood-soaked man. Okay, Danny said, turning the old man around to face him. You take a seat right there on the floor, Doc, he said, motioning at the muddy floor. The old man looked at the floor with disdain, but did as he was ordered, grimacing as the cold mud soaked through the knees of his trouser legs. Okay, Danny said, addressing the blood-soaked figure. First things first, are you bit? For a moment the man didn't answer, before slowly shaking his head. Right, lose the club, slowly walk towards me. The man did as he was bid, slowly rising to his feet and staggering forward. It's close enough, Danny barked. Now turn around and face the door and don't move. Not so much as a fucking inch, or my partner here will blow your head off. Joe, you got him? Sure thing, Joe said, pointing his gun at the swaying man. Danny was glad to see his partner's hand was rock steady. All right, I'm gonna go get the scanner. Everyone stay cool, everything will be cool. That said, he holstered his gun and ran to the ambulance, throwing open the door and grabbing a scanner off the side of the dashboard, quickly returning to the other man. Okay, he said. I'm gonna scan you now. Better hope and pray that you aren't lying to us. You know what's gonna happen if this thing turns red. The other man nodded. All right, then, Danny said. Let's get this done. Taking a deep breath, he took a step back and drew his weapon, resting the cold metal barrel against the other man's head. He raised the scanner and pressed the button for a moment. The thing hummed to life as it scanned the blood-soaked man and then let out an ear-piercing beep. And the display screen glowed green. Danny let out a sigh of relief, then gently laid the trembling man to the ground. Are you hurt? He said. Whose blood is this, and where are the 2 crewmen you sent for? Is there still a reanimated in there? The man held up a restraining hand, cutting off the flood of questions. No, he answered. I'm not hurt. We managed to fend it off. I mean him, my father. Please, the other man interrupted from his kneeling position by the van. Poor David's been through so much. Please, let me explain. He slowly climbed to his feet, his hands still raised. Danny waved him over impatiently. All right, he said. You lower your hands, and please, for the love of God, tell me what the hell's going on here. Joe, you got that door covered. Sure have, partner, Joe responded. Do your thing. All right. What's the story, Doc? The other man ignored the question, instead kneeling down, dragging his son-in-law to his feet. You all right, David? Truly all right. Yes, the other man said, seeming to regain some of his former strength. I'll never get used to this, Robert. Never. Get used to what? Danny interrupted. Somebody better start talking sense, and real soon, or you'll both be charged with obstruction. Now, whose blood is that, and what's the situation inside? All right, the doctor said, turning to Danny. Poor David's father, Mac, he died of what was probably a massive heart attack in the night. Considering the man's size, we awoke to the sound of pounding on the bedroom door and the groaning of the hungry dead inside. We, Danny interrupted. Who's we? Let's get a real head count here. Sorry, the doctor responded in his cultured voice. Myself, my daughter, Marcia, and David, of course. Where's the woman? Danny asked quickly. Is she still inside? Is she bit? No, of course not, the doctor recoiled. Do you think us foolish? As soon as we knew what was happening, we sent her down the road to our neighbor. She was quite safe, I assure you. After that, we rang the center to come and collect poor Mac. They came post-haste, but... And here he stopped, looking down at the ground, a tremor running through his body. And? Danny encouraged. What happened? We took them to the room. They drew their weapons and they rushed in, but all went wrong. One of them slipped on the bathroom rug and he fell and his weapon discharged and shot his friend in the guts. It all happened in a matter of seconds, you understand. Then poor old Mac was upon them, tearing into them. And David tried to beat him off, but to no avail. In the end, he had no choice but to retreat and lock the door. Both your men here dead by then. I can assure you we did not just lock them in and leave them to their fate. I promise you that. Jesus, Danny said. Both of them dead. I'm sorry, the old man said. We did all we could, didn't we, Davy? The younger man nodded, but said nothing, his eyes cast down. How do you want to play this, Danny? Joe asked, never taking his eyes off the open doorway. Okay, Danny said, straightening his shoulders. You stay with Davy here while I go take a look at the situation with the doc. We won't be rushing into anything tonight. When I get back, we're radio for backup depending on the situation. All right, Joe said. Watch your ass, partner. Always, Danny replied. Okay, Doc, lead the way. The house was big, almost a mini mansion. Danny tried to look everywhere at once as he followed the old party up the winding staircase and onto the second floor. The creature was supposedly secured, but you could never be too careful. Danny had only been a child when the Lazarus virus had swept across the UK, killing all in its path. only to reanimate them once again in the hungry dead. Those days were dim in his mind. An unfocused montage of screaming and running, fire and death all about him. That had been nearly 30 years ago. A new generation was born with an immunity to Lazarus, and mankind had fought back with the renewed hope in its heart for the future. Now the old survivors alive, but infected with ticking time bombs, were dying, and it was Danny's job to clean up the mess. "Okay," the doc said, stopping and pointing to an old-fashioned wooden door down the hall. "We are here. Mac is just inside, locked behind that door. He'll be requiring this," he said, passing Danny the key. "You keep hold of it till I take a look inside," Danny said. "How do you expect to do that without this?" he said, once again trying to hand him the key. Danny ignored the offer and stepped past the doctor, taking a small case from his overall pocket. He snapped it open, revealing the long, flexible probe attached to a small screen. "How clever," the doctor said from behind him. "Okay," Danny said, kneeling down and feeding the probe under the door. "Let's see what we have here." He pressed a button, the screen shone to life, revealing the closed room in front of him. For a moment, Danny didn't understand what he was seeing. The room behind the door was covered in some sort of plastic sheeting. Blood was smeared across the walls and lay in puddles upon the plastic floor. 2 men were chained to the walls, and Danny recognized John Willis, the ambulance driver of Meat Wagon 3. Chained, gagged, and naked in place against the wall. He turned. What the hell? But his question was cut off by a heavy pottery vase smashing across his face, sending him crashing in the darkness. He awoke sometime later to a gentle tap on his face. He groaned and tried to swat the incessant hand away from him, but the cold chains held him in place. Chains! It all came flooding back to him. The room, the blood, poor John Willis, and where the hell was his partner, Joe? "The fuck are you doing?" he asked the doctor, who now had retreated to the center of the room where he sat on a cheap-looking plastic chair, looking at Danny with something akin to pity. "Now, Mr. Thornton, please calm yourself. Just, let's discuss this in a civil manner." "Fuck you!" Danny spat. "Joe!" he screamed. "Joe, help me! Where are you?" "Too late for that, Mr. Thornton," the doctor said, straightening his cuffs. "I'm afraid your friend Joe has been dead these past 2 days. He and the other gentleman your office sent before him. Only you remain." "Please," Danny pleaded. "What do you want from me? Okay, just let me go, okay? I won't tell anyone. You'll never see me again. I promise, just cut me loose," he said, growling in anger and straining against his bonds. "Just fucking cut me loose!" Now, Mr. Thornton, let's talk about this like civilized men. After all, you'll be making a great sacrifice for your country. One day your name will be in the analogues of history right beside mine, along with all the others that have made the ultimate sacrifice in the name of science." "What science?" Danny said, shrinking down into his chains. "Where are the others? What are you going to do to me?" "So hard to explain," the doctor said, running his fingers distractedly through his hair. "So much has happened, and how to explain it to a layman such as yourself. I want you to understand. I need you to understand that your sacrifices won't be for nothing." Suddenly, his face lit up. "David," he called over his shoulder, "please, bring her in." "Now, you'll see," he said briskly, rubbing his hands together. "Now you'll see all that I've accomplished." Danny could do nothing but look on in horror as a zombie was led into the room, a collar around its neck. Holding the chain was David Tomlinson. Danny scrambled backward against the wall, and the thing lunged at him, arms strained. She would have grabbed him then, latched onto him, and dragged him towards her waiting mouth, except her hands had been wrapped in tape, and her mouth gagged. With a curse, David Tomlinson dragged her away, and Danny looked on in disgust as the man wrapped his arm around her thrashing body, whispering and crooning gentle words into her ear. Suddenly the zombie stopped her thrashing and stood stock still, like some child's toy from which the batteries had been rudely yanked. "There," the doctor said, smiling up from his chair. "That's better. You must forgive Marcia. She hasn't been fed for the last few hours, and she gets so desperately hungry." Danny said nothing, but just sat hunched, his mouth agape. The zombie stood still, didn't try to attack the two men closest to it, just stood there swaying, his cloudy eyes staring greedily toward him. "You must have questions," the doctor continued. "So many questions." Danny managed to rip his gaze away from the gray figure and looked at the doctor as if seeing him for the first time. "What have you done to it?" he croaked. "Why is it not attacking you?" A look of annoyance flashed across the doctor's face. "We do not refer to her as it, Mr. Thornton. Her name is Marcia. She is my daughter and poor David's wife." Behind him, David let out a sigh and began to stroke the zomb's filthy blonde hair. He only stopped when a large chunk of her scalp came away in his hand. With that same melancholy sigh, he placed it back in place and began to straighten the remains of her tattered dress. "Jesus," Danny said, repeating the same question. "What have you done to her?" "Jesus has nothing to do with it," the doctor said, rising from his chair, beginning to pace the room. "Or perhaps he does. Did not Jesus raise the dead after all? Is the virus not called the Lazarus virus? I was there, when it got loose. I was one of the chief scientists at Pelton Down. I had been studying the effects on reanimating dead tissue when the damn thing got loose. We don't even know how it happened. Suddenly the siren started to bray and the whole facility went into lockdown. I was trapped in my very own office for nearly 24 hours. While the cleanup crews went over the place with a fine-tooth comb, disinfecting, spraying the place down, giving the people blood tests. Of course, back then, we didn't know how the virus hides and hibernates in some people, what we now call a slow burn. Before we knew it, the virus was everywhere, and of course the dead came with it. We held on to the facility for as long as we could, and I was close. I was so close to a breakthrough. Those fools threw me out, claiming that I was doing things that were unethical. Here we were, the world falling apart all around us, millions dying. They kick up a fuss about a few live subjects. After that, I fled the facility before it became overrun and came south to this remote farm to find David. Of course, my daughter, Marcia. But poor Marcia had already been infected. She was dying when I arrived. Her temperature so high, she burned with fever. She turned that very same day, and we imprisoned her. Of course, David wanted to kill her out of love and end her suffering, but I told him it was a different way. I told him about my experiments and the fruit that they had bared, and how the dead were not really dead, how their lower brains still functioned, how they were trapped inside themselves. "And have you ever wondered," he said, turning back to face Danny, "why you only kill them with a shot to the head, or a massive brain trauma? Why would this kill them if they were already dead?" "Not my ignorant friend," he said, kneeling down in front of Danny. "That's because a part of them is still alive. Then I found a cocktail of certain drugs, and constant feeding. I believe the process can be almost completely reversed." "You're mad," Danny said, lunging forward, causing the old party to scramble away. "She's dead. She's fucking dead. And how many of you murdered? How many of you fed to that thing?" "Please," the doctor said, hurrying away and standing back down, wiping at his brow with a rumpled handkerchief. "There's no need to be violent, Mr. Thornton." "Violent?" Danny spat. "Violent? You're talking about feeding me to that thing." "She's no thing," the doctor said, jumping back to his feet. "In fact, in the last 5 years, she's come on leaps and bounds. She now recognizes herself in a mirror. She recognizes David and I. Look how docile she is around us. She can even speak a few minor words. Look," he said, ripping the gag from her mouth. "Speak," he demanded. "Say something, my dear." As soon as the gag was removed, the zombie lunged forward, causing the startled doctor to leap back with a cry of alarm, but she was jerked back just in time, saving them from her gnashing teeth. Cursing, David dragged the creature that had once been his wife across the room and chained her to the nearby wall, careful to avoid her snapping teeth. On the floor, Danny began to laugh hysterically. You done a damn fine job, Doc, he laughed. Look how civilized she's become. You think this is funny? The doctor rounded on him. But it's not. Don't you understand? Can't you see? She's only attacked at the most opportune moment after the gag was removed. That shows planning and cognitive reasoning. You're fucking mad. Danny shook his head sadly. Your own grief and denial has driven you insane. Let me go and I'll put that poor thing out of its misery. I won't even report you straight away. Just give you a little time to run. I'm sorry. Sorry that you don't understand. Come now, David. We're leaving. Wait, Danny said, scrambling to his feet. What about me? You can't do this. You have to let me go. You can't just leave me here. She was openly weeping now. Please, let me loose. I'm sorry, the doctor said once again. But we are leaving now. We close this door, the lights will go off, and her chains will unlock automatically. We've been running experiments these last few weeks on how her senses have started to become more heightened. She should have no problem finding you in the dark. No, wait! Danny screamed. But it was too late. The door was already closed and the lights blinked out. In the darkness, he heard the clank of chains as they dropped to the floor and the low groan of hunger and the sound of shuffling feet. Then, floating out of the darkness, a woman's voice. Where are you? Please. I'm so hungry. Where are you? Danny began to laugh, his mind breaking like a rotten shell at the sound of that dusty voice. When a cold hand clamped down on his wrist, he began to scream. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video. Or listening to tonight's podcast on the podcast, if you're listening to that there at Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you could happen to listen to podcasts. I wanted to remind you guys also that my wife sells loose leaf tea at etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocletea. She has different teas, including creepypasta teas, and you can get a Mr. Creepypasta tea. If you ask for a dabbing sticker, she also has those. And of course, I wanted to give a big thank you to everyone who checks out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta and supports the show, keeps the light on, gives me treats for my now 2 cats, both Hylas and Hercules. Both of them are a handful. And especially a big thank you to Saha, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Mazikeen, Ken Lando Higuchi, Chompski, Nico kaeo, Tristain Pelton, Stephen VanHuss, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, G. Weevil 3, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Hades' Nephew, Carter Barenfanger, Dr. Strawberry, Jordan Wayne Deckard, Bradney Leipe, The Government Monitoring System, Anne Charron, rumblefox, AcidSystem, Mike Bullock, Raphael Rodriguez, Dan Sweet, Mad Marshtomp, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Sean Mills, Brian Arce, Cryptic Nightmares, Shadow Morningstar, Somber Puppet, Brianna Wright, Someone You Love, Said the King 56, Bad Honey, S-Man, Kiri the Sloth, Patrick Schoolmeister, Thomas Burgett, Barbara Maceo, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, The Homeless Bird 93, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Last Blade Song, Eliminator 86, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, and Corey X Kenshin. A big thank you to all of you guys and everybody down there in the description. I really can't thank you guys enough for supporting the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody who listens, sweet dreams.